Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin and the US dollar currency index, DXY. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Remember to check out the premium list if you want to know how I'm navigating these markets. You can find a link to that down below as well. Let's go ahead and jump in. So the dollar is something we have, in fact, extensively covered in the past and how it relates to Bitcoin. If you've not followed it before, I would recommend adding it to your watch list, DXY. Now, typically speaking, or maybe I should say historically speaking, when the dollar is going down, that tends to be good for Bitcoin. So let's take a look at exactly what I mean. Starting here in March of 2020, the dollar hit a local top and then bled all the way down 13% or so, around 13%. Okay, this is how far the dollar fell, about 13% over a little over a year. Okay, over about a year or so, maybe a little bit over. And during that time, we know that Bitcoin went on one hell of a run. I mean, it was just tearing upwards. Look, March, and then here in May was when we finally broke this, major structure of everything being only bullish. Okay, so you can see now the dollar is starting to rebound a little bit. But I don't think it's clear yet if it's going to be a sustained uptrend or not. Now, this is an example of the dollar going down and Bitcoin going up, okay? Here's an example of the dollar going up. What was going on over here? January of 2018 until March of 2020. Well, here's January 2018. You know that Bitcoin was more or less just heading down during this time. So the dollar going down, Bitcoin goes up. The dollar goes up, Bitcoin goes down. We can also go back even further if you want more data points. If you look at it, say, in 2014, we can see that in 2014, the dollar was going up. But in also 2014, we know that 2014 was a bear market for Bitcoin. Okay, so 2014 was a bear market for Bitcoin. The dollar was going up. Over here, in starting the end of 2016 until early 2018, the dollar was going down. What was Bitcoin doing during that time? Well, it was going on a crazy parabolic run in 2017. So if history is any indication, we know that a bullish dollar tends to also have tends to coincide with a bearish Bitcoin, but a bullish Bitcoin tends to coincide with a bearish dollar. Now, that doesn't mean it always has to play out like that. It doesn't mean that one causes the other one. We're just taking notes, okay? We're just noting it and saying, well, when the dollar's going up, Bitcoin's going down. When Bitcoin's going up, the dollar's going down. And now, there is some hesitancy with the dollar, okay? It just had another move to the upside. The reason we have these rectangles on here, I mean, these are the same ones I've had drawn on this channel for over a year. The only reason we wanted to keep an eye on this area is because this is in fact where the dollar sort of turned around back in January of 2018. So that's where we currently are. Okay, that's where we currently are, and you can see we've had a move back up to the upside. Now, I should say that just because the bottom for the dollar was around 89 to 90 back in 2018 doesn't mean that we have to ultimately go up from here for the next several years. But it could be a little bit of a bounce for a while before we maybe continue the trend down. One of the interesting things with the dollar is that everyone basically in the world expects it to lose value. And they've been saying that for months and months and months. And if you go back and watch all of our videos on this channel on the dollar, we said, let's not get too carried away. There's a good chance the dollar holds the line here, at least in the short term. Why do we say that? Well, if you think about it, how many times in history has everyone predicted the dollar to fall and then it falls? How many times does that happen? Typically, what happens in the market is oftentimes not what people expect. And that's why, again, if you go back and watch our videos on the dollar back in January and February, we discussed the idea that we could see it bounce We did bounce. We came back down. We bounced again. And so this is sort of the battleground for the dollar. It doesn't mean it's not going to ultimately fall through, but the fact that it's bouncing and not immediately continuing down could be having some impact on the price of Bitcoin. I mean, again, you can see that it really had its first bounce in January, and in January of 2021, you can see that was right in this area. So this is right where the dollar started to bounce, but then it came back down. It came back down in March, and in March, we know Bitcoin was putting in new all-time highs up here. Now the dollar is coming back up. So I think it's worth at least keeping a close eye on it again, because the sustained move by the dollar to the upside tends to not be great for Bitcoin. Again, I'm not anticipating, a multi-year bear market for Bitcoin or anything like that, but I do think we're in the middle of like a mini bear market, if you will, that will probably last a total of 3 to 6 months, of which we're already in the first month of it, or we're already in the second month of it. I should say we've already had about a month of it. So maybe I should say another 2 to 5 months. But regardless, I think we're in a 3 to 6 month mini bear market. I mean, the way I look at the market is I'm not here to, to fill some emotional desire for the price of Bitcoin to go to some specific value by a certain date. Therefore, I'm not obligated to constantly say that Bitcoin is still overly bullish in the short term, when being down 50% is fairly not a bullish thing. I mean, it doesn't mean it can't rebound and ultimately go back up. But if the argument is that, Bitcoin going down 55% is still bullish, then I think that's more of a case of people who were telling other people to FOMO in at 65K. They're trying to cover themselves and say, all right, this is normal. Typically speaking, when you're in a market cycle, we've seen 70% drops again in Bitcoin. And go back to 2013, we saw a 70% drop. Okay. I mean, this is a market cycle for sure. Like, this is one big market cycle, but the period, the way I see it, I mean, the period from April 2013 until June of 2013, we dropped 76%. We didn't put in a new all-time high for 2/3 of a year or so. So the idea that, that you can't have sort of phases of bullish times and bearish times within a market cycle, I think is a little bit too constraining. I think you can have both. That doesn't mean it has to be a long bear market, but it could be a brief one. And that's what we've discussed before. So I think that it's worth keeping a close eye on the US dollar currency index. Again, this is DXY. You can see that it is in fact right now above the 20-week estimate. I don't know how important, the importance of the 20-week estimate for the dollar might not be as important. You can see that it hasn't really respected it that much in the past. Maybe you could look at something like the 50-week. So that's the 100-week. Maybe you could look at the 50-week and note that just a few weeks ago, that was where we got rejected from. Right now, we went right above it. We're currently trading just below it. So if we continue to get rejected down, and if the dollar goes to new lows, and say drops below 89 or something and continues lower, then this is probably relatively good for Bitcoin. If, on the other hand, you see the dollar continuing to move up this way, then that's probably not so great for Bitcoin in the short term. Okay, it doesn't mean we're not still on our path in the grand scheme of our lengthened market cycle, but it could mean that things are not going to immediately rebound and put in new all-time highs. So I think we need time. I think we'll get there. I do think we'll get there this cycle, and that we will put in new all-time highs. I just wouldn't expect a new all-time high so soon. I mean, last month there were tons of people calling for new all-time highs in June, and here we are in June, and now they've just kicked the can down the road on when they think we're going to get all-time highs. Now they're saying, oh, we'll get it in July, or we're going to get it in August. But remember, a lot of these people will just keep kicking the can down the road on when the new all-time high is going to come once it becomes glaringly obvious that it's not going to pan out on exactly the bullish time frame that they gave you. And we were pretty adamant all along that Bitcoin was in fact ahead of schedule in where it should be in the market cycle, and that a consolidation phase and not a V-shaped recovery was more likely than not. And you go over here and you look at the chart, and I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know how one can continue to speculate that this could be a V-shaped recovery. I mean, if anything, maybe it would be a U-shaped recovery if it were to come up. I mean, even if it, let's say it did something like this would certainly not be a V-shaped recovery at this point. But I think with regards to the U.S. dollar, we just need to give it a little bit more time. See if it's actually going to make a sustained move back up to the upside, or if we're just going to keep playing in the sandbox around these levels. And again, this hesitation at least is maybe enough to cause the price of Bitcoin to stall out for a while and maybe be range bound between 30 to 40K, maybe 50K. Okay, even 50K is still more than $10,000 below the prior all-time high. But 50K is still a pretty high target at this point, as it does represent a price valuation that is in fact above the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA. Again, the 21-week EMA right now for Bitcoin is lower than the 20-week SMA. Currently, the 21-week EMA is coming in a very modest $42,566, and the 20-week SMA is coming in at around $48,960. Of course, this will depend on the exchange you use. Some places have it as lower, 48.7. Some have it 48.9, 48.8. So it does vary. Anyways, hopefully this video is somewhat informative. Again, we have a lot of videos on the U.S. dollar currency index, and this hesitation here is somewhat, coinciding with Bitcoin hesitating itself within its own market cycle. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Remember to check out the sale or the store, the merch store. We have a store where we sell like t-shirts and coffee mugs and whatnot. So if you're looking for anything like that, check that out in the description below. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon to turn on your notifications, and I will see you next time. Bye.